Hey folks, today on Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser, we're diving into a law that's often misunderstood, as many of the universal laws are, but this is the universal law of sacrifice. And no, this isn't about suffering or giving up everything you love. It's about releasing what no longer serves you so you can rise higher. I'll share how this law has shaped my own journey, and we'll explore practical ways you can use it in both your personal life and your business. So if you've been feeling stuck or weighed down, this episode is your reminder that letting go is often the very key to growth. Welcome to Lead Your Life, the podcast for people who are seeking harmony in business and in life. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I'm an inner mastery and business mindset coach and the chief igniter here at the Lit Up Life. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what they value most. Welcome, we're glad you're here. Straight from the corners of my mind. Welcome, folks. Glad to have you back here to Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am your host, Debbie Heiser, entrepreneur, coach, speaker, and someone who's passionate about helping you live what I call a lit up life. What does that really mean? It means creating a business, a life that you love, one that aligns with your purpose, brings you abundance, and lights you up from the inside out. Every other week, we talk about mindset shifts, the universal laws, and the practical strategies that will help you step into your next level without burnout or losing yourself in the process. I see way too many people burned out and tired, and life is too short to live that way. So grab your coffee or take me with you on your walk, and let's dig into today's topic, the universal law of sacrifice. So, most of us hear the word sacrifice and instantly, what do we think of? We think of struggle. We picture deprivation, sacrifice, giving something up, or going without. But here's the interesting thing about the universal law of sacrifice, it flips that script. It's very counterintuitive to what we hear about sacrifice because what it says is in order to step into a higher version of yourself, and as you step into a higher version of yourself, you're helping other people in a higher version of yourself. You must release something of a lower vibration, something that keeps you small. It was interesting. I was talking to someone years ago and they were talking about how, capacity, if you think about Legos, a lot of times when you're putting something together in a Lego, there's that thin strip that has the little, I don't know what they call them, but the little pegs that kind of stick up that you put the rest of the Legos on. And they were describing for me this in relationship to relationships, but I look at it as far as anything, right? That we have a capacity for certain things. And once that Lego sheet is filled, and there's no other little things sticking up to attach other Legos to, we're full. We can't take on more. So in order to be able to take on something or build something new or build something different, we have to take Legos off to be able to start it with something different. So I want you to think about this. If you think about things that you have stepped into, entrepreneurship, I know I had to sacrifice the security of a paycheck. I just had to learn how to manage my money differently, right? I wanted security, and that security is still there. It just looks a little different than a paycheck every 2 weeks. In order to grow your business, you may have to sacrifice doing everything yourself so that you can delegate, you can lead, allow you to do more of what your genius is. When you think about too, maybe in a leadership role, right? If you want to lead with confidence, we might have to sacrifice this people pleasing that we have. And I run into that a lot with women, and a fear of being judged, like giving a crap about what other people say about us. And so I don't know about you, but I'd love to get rid of some of those things, because if we want to lead authentically, we have to let go of the people pleasing. We have to let go of the fear of being judged. So when you think about sacrifice in that way, sacrifice is not a punishment. It's really a gateway to expansion. It's really saying to the universe, I'm willing to let go of what keeps me here in this spot. And I talk to a lot of people that feel stuck, right? Like that you're in quicksand, or, one of my favorite sayings that Peter Crone says is when you stand in your shit long enough, it stops smelling, right? So when it keeps us where we're at, I want to be willing to let go of what keeps me here so that I can rise higher. And that's really the frame that I want you to hold today as we start to walk through this. So for me, one of the biggest sacrifices I had to make is the idea that my worth, me being loved, was tied to how much I did, right? And this started way back in high school. I think my mom probably had this too because she was super busy all the time. I mean, I was at school early in the morning for marching band and was there late at night through the rehearsals for musicals and volleyball practice and all of these things, right? Student council. And I used to believe that this productivity equaled value and value equaled I could be loved, right? So the more hours I worked, the more I put into something, then I proved myself to other people. And it was really coming from this prove it energy, this intention. But really, the truth was that belief was a lower vibration. It kept me exhausted, resentful. I was disconnected from my joy. A lot of times I didn't even know who I was anymore. Who is the Debbie? And I talk to so many clients that don't know who they are, right? They put on these hats or these masks of being the mom, of being the wife, of being and all the implied expectations that they put on themselves. 90% of the time, no one else is putting those expectations on us. Or to be a good worker, I have to like work, work, work all the time, when in fact, that's not the case. So when I started to sacrifice that old story, and that's honestly, folks, a lot of what I help people do is uncover those subconscious messages and those old stories and rebuild new stories. So when I started to sacrifice that old story about myself, I created space for something bigger, something higher. I'm I'm more present. I have more peace in my life, and I actually love my life. And so when you think about it, it might look like the sacrificing might look like a belief that you're not enough. And a lot of these, again, are beliefs, right? If you think about the neuroscience of the brain and how the subconscious mind can only accept beliefs, we start to create this belief that creates our identity. So a lot of times, and what I've done and help people do is deconstruct the identity a little bit and or figure out what that identity is, because we've lost what that identity is. So many times it comes down to this belief that we're not enough, that we're not lovable, and we create habits out of that, right? And the habits then are the overwork and the overgiving of ourselves. We fear what other people might think about us. And so we don't show up fully in joy. I have a couple of friends that I love it because they just show up and they don't care what other people are thinking about them. And they have so much joy in their life. I learned so much from being around them all of the time. So sacrifice always asks the question, what are you willing to release so that you can receive more? Now, part of this is I help people also learn how to receive because we've been taught not to receive. So I'm going to give you a practical exercise and then we're going to take a quick break. But I want you to think about and like take out a piece of paper and I want you to think about things that you say to yourself or that you hear other people say to you. And I want you to take a piece of paper and I want you to draw a line down the middle. And on the left, I want you to write the things, the beliefs, or the habits that you know are keeping you stuck, that are keeping you small, keeping you away from maybe what's out there that you're wanting different. And on the right side, I want you to write the higher version of yourself that emerges when you release them. So like on as an example, on the left, you might say, I say yes when I really want to say no. Now, anybody out there that has elementary school kids, this happens a lot. Oh, yeah, I'll bring the cookies. Yeah, I'll be a part of the PTA. Yeah, I'll be this. Now, I'm not saying don't volunteer. Volunteerism, that's the law of abundance, and in giving you shall receive, right? But it's making sure that it aligns with what you want, with what your child feels the most supported with, like there's things to that. But on the left, put down as an example, I say yes when I want to say no. And then on the right, put down this up-leveled version of yourself, what you might say. I protect my time and energy, and because of that, I show up more powerfully. I say yes to the things I want to say yes to. I say no to the things I want to say no to. And in the process, I'm not hurting anyone's feelings. Because this is where the magic begins when you consciously choose what you're sacrificing. Because otherwise, we turn into a victim and say, I had to go do this, or I have to go make these cookies for whatever, right? You get to. So, with that, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about the business application of it and a little bit more about this lens of sacrifice. I want to give a quick shout out to my favorite online community for women entrepreneurs. It's called Build Her. If you've craved a space to connect with other women who truly get the journey, this is your space. We go live monthly for in-depth training on all things business, and it's where you'll get the latest news from the lit up life first. Plus a chance to swap stories, tips, and triumphs with an amazing community of women. It's welcoming, it's fun, and it's where we cheer each other on through every up and down of entrepreneurship. Join us and let's build each other up. Check it out at thelituplife.com/buildher. Okay, we are back. So hopefully you filled out your sheet and you have some things on the left that kind of talk about the things that the beliefs or the habits that you have that are keeping you stuck. One that I used to have was I hit snooze all the time. And there are occasions that like I hit snooze this morning because my dog is still kind of acclimating back to my time zone and he was up at 3:30 and I couldn't fall back to sleep. And so I hit snooze a couple of times this morning. But, for the most part, I more often than not, I do not. As a matter of fact, a lot of times I don't set an alarm because I just wake up. I do after trips because I'm reacclimating to the time zone. But hopefully on the left, you wrote down some things that are holding you there, like hitting the snooze button. And on the right, you might then, I'm hoping you wrote the things of your higher version, like I get up charged and ready to go for the day, that are kind of more affirming to yourself. And really kind of resonate on that list. Take a look at it and see which ones are maybe some affirmations. I'm not a lover of affirmations, but sometimes where we're at in the point in our journey is we need to hear ourselves say it out loud. So kind of in that same realm, I want to talk a little bit about how the law of attraction, geez, the law of sacrifice applies to the business as well. So when you think about this, the law of sacrifice is everywhere as an entrepreneur because in order to grow, we must sacrifice something. We, it might be the need for perfection so that we can actually launch. This week I was with someone that they wanted to launch a new program this fall, and I kept asking them, what's the date that you want to do? And she would never commit to the date. And what that tells me is that there's something going on internally, whether it's perfection, fear of being seen, or any of those types of things, right? That are stopping her from setting a date and going for it. So it could show up that way. It could be that we're in our comfort zone. So then it makes it hard for us to step into being more visible. That's something I've struggled with and had to work through. It could also be sacrificing control so that we can scale and let other people take the reins. I've seen this over and over again with my clients, men and women. And the ones who make the leap, who sacrifice staying safe for stepping into their calling, are the ones who thrive. And so, how did I do this? Honestly, some of it was I practiced and I created situations to kind of represent something. So, I did things that scared me because I've always had this adage that you should feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable. But honestly, when you start to feel comfortable, that means you're not growing. So, I practiced and I jumped out of an airplane. Now, that one was a significant thing for me because I had gotten divorced and it was kind of this idea of freedom. Plus, I was facing a fear that I had of heights. I took a hot air balloon that ride. That has been on my bucket list for years since I was a kid, but it was a little frightening if you're afraid of heights, right? Because there's nothing strapped in. You're just hanging on. You're in there. I spent the week on the back of a horse. I didn't know if I could do this. I've always had this love of horses, but I've also had a little bit of fear of horses. And mainly because most of the horses I rode when I was a kid were my cousin's horses and they were half wild. So, and I would get bucked off and not the best experience, let's say. So, another one is that I said yes to sharing my resilience story, my own personal journey through resiliency. And so I constantly am saying yes to those things because I know they're going to level me up, right? I'm sacrificing this belief that if I am walking across a bridge that's up high, that I'm going to fall in, right? Like I'm letting go of these messages that freeze me. And so, uh, you know, feeling uncomfortable is a leveling up. And once you level up and start to feel comfortable, I had that happen this summer. I got a little comfortable and I'm like, I need to be shaken up a little bit because I've lost some creativity. I've lost this pizzazz. And, so then I went out and hired a coach to help me with that. But as a leader in corporate, I used to say to people, if you aren't uncomfortable, you aren't growing. So let me just tell you this straight up. If you're not willing to let go of the thing that keeps you comfortable, you're not ready for the thing that you say you want. Let me say that again. If you're not willing to let go of the thing that's keeping you comfortable, you're not ready for the thing you say you want. And sometimes, folks, this is not easy to see. It's not easy to see because we're too close to it, hence why coaching is really important, but also it can be a hard pill to swallow. There are times I know I used to years ago, even back to fourth grade, I would act like I was sick, right? Because I would get attention from my parents. I had two younger sisters. And that kind of carried over into my adult life. And it was interesting because um, up until probably this was about 10 years ago, I realized that that was a way that I got attention, was to talk about my ailments, to talk about my dieting, to talk about all this stuff. And that wasn't an easy pill to swallow. So I had to sacrifice that way of getting attention and realizing that that was not healthy. That was keeping me in a spot of victimhood. So I share that with you just as an example that, again, sometimes it's not easy to look in that mirror and say, whoa, wow, okay. So don't spiral downward in your energy and in your vibration, but really look at it as a way to learn and level yourself up. That's what this whole law is about. So, if you think about business, or it might be the work that you're in, think about a goal that you're holding right now. It might be hitting six figures, it might be filling your next program, it might be getting a promotion, maybe it's launching a product. Ask yourself these questions. What would it take to make that happen? Because we have to identify that, right? Like, what would it take for me to get the promotion at work? What would it take for me to launch the new product, right? And many of you are listening to this at the end of September, and I'm changing up a big portion of my business model that's launching October 1st. And, so I've had to go through this recently too. So, what would it take to get to that? Then, as you look at that, anywhere you feel kind of tinged with that, ask yourself the question, what must I sacrifice to step into this vision? What do I need to let go of to allow space for what I want? Is it procrastination? Is it underpricing or undervaluing myself? Is it hiding because I'm worried about what people are going to say to me? You go as deep as you want to, but write it down, claim it. Because once you know what you must release, you then have power over it. Then do some type of physical activity to release it. Burn it in a fire, tear it up, throw it away, say it out loud to a trusted friend, write yourself a letter, whatever it is for you that is meaningful to you. And because these things are so important, because it's also how the law of sacrifice works in harmony with the law of compensation. Because you see, we're never left empty handed, but we have to understand what we want. What would it take to get to where we want? And then what do we need to let go of? Because we're never left empty handed. When I let go of something that no longer serves me, I create space. And the universe abhors a vacuum, and that space gets filled with something better. But we have to choose that better. If we just aimlessly go about it and we're not thinking about what we want, now I'm not saying we have to pigeonhole ourselves in, but if we're not willing to state what we want, then the universe gets confused and that space gets filled with something else. So, in order for that space to get filled with something better, to be inspired, go through that exercise. And if you think about it, it's kind of like pruning a tree. And actually, this year I pruned my lavender bushes and I was like, oh my gosh, and my rose bush that actually came across a covered wagon. And cutting off the dead branches kind of, felt a little harsh, but it's really the only way to let new growth come in, right? And so that new growth came in and they're now beautiful. They produce much more than they ever had. And that really is what sacrifice is. It's pruning away the old so that the new can flourish. So here's something you can try this week. Every morning, ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice today so I can step into who I'm becoming? It might be sacrificing the snooze button, like I talked about before, so you can start your day grounded. Or it might be sacrificing a fear and finally sending a proposal to someone. And the reward is freedom. It's alignment. It's stepping into the business and the life you've been visioning all along. So, really, the part I don't want you to miss in this is sacrifice doesn't mean suffering. It doesn't mean you lose your joy. In fact, real sacrifice leads to joy. When you let go of what's heavy, what's outdated, what's not aligned with you, you feel lighter. You create space for joy to flow. In my own life, every time I've released something that wasn't serving me, whether it was a job, a relationship, or a limiting belief, yeah, it felt uncomfortable at first, but the freedom, the joy, the expansion that followed, that was worth every moment of discomfort. So don't be afraid of sacrifice. Be excited about what it's creating space for, and that will change the way you look at things. So, to recap, the law of sacrifice reminds us that in order to rise higher, we have to release something that's a lower vibration, that's in a lower space for us. It shows up in our personal life, it shows up in our business, when we let go of old stories and habits like perfection, our comfort zones, and control, so that we can then grow, letting go of that. And every sacrifice is really an exchange. It's pruning away the old so something more beautiful can flourish. And here's my invitation for you. Do the exercises that were in here. And if you're ready to step into your next level, to sacrifice the mask, the fear, the smallness, join us at the Cast Your Vision Retreat in Sandpoint, Idaho, October 23rd through the 26th. This retreat is your chance to step away from the noise, reflect, release, and vision the next chapter of your business and your life. You'll be surrounded by an incredible community of women who walk alongside you as you claim what's next. So head over to thelituplife.com/retreat and grab your spot. There's only a couple left. I can't wait to see you there. With that, folks, it's a wrap. Everyone have a fantastic couple weeks, and we'll see you in October. That's a wrap for this conversation. I'm so glad you've joined us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch all of our future episodes, and visit us at thelituplife.com for details on how you can become part of the Lit Up Life community. A quick shout out to my friend Jackie Wilson and her friends, the creators of our amazing theme music. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this perfect song with our listeners. Looking forward to having you listen in to our next episode.